David Hamilton was one of the richest men in Maplewood City. His face often appeared in business magazines. His name was always linked to success, and people spoke of him as a man who could turn anything into profit. But inside his mansion, life was very different from what people imagined. The Hamilton estate was big, beautiful, and full of expensive furniture. Tall glass windows surrounded the house, polished floors stretched across wide halls, and every room carried the mark of wealth. Yet, the place felt cold and empty. The silence inside the mansion was heavy. David lived there with his only daughter, Sophia. She was 8 years old, but unlike other children, she never ran through the house, never played with toys, and rarely spoke. From birth, doctors told David that Sophia had been born blind. He believed them. He carried their words like a stone in his chest. Every day he looked at her and blamed himself. Sophia's mother, Anna, had died in a helicopter crash just days after giving birth. Losing her broke David completely. He pulled away from the outside world and shut himself in the estate. All his love, all his energy went to Sophia. She became the only reason he kept breathing. He brought in specialists, tutors, and therapists. Some traveled from far countries, some charged large sums, but none gave him hope. Everyone told him the same thing: Sophia could not see. David accepted it, though deep inside, he never stopped wishing for a miracle. Most days, Sophia sat quietly by the living room window, holding her old teddy bear close to her chest. Her eyes stayed open, but they never focused on anything. Sometimes she tilted her head at sounds, but nothing more. To David, it felt like she was trapped in a world he could not reach. He tried everything to connect with her. He played music, told stories, described colors, and guided her through the garden. But most of the time, she remained silent. Only once in a while, she would rest her head against his chest, and those brief moments were enough to keep him going. At 42, David looked older than his age. Grief had left lines on his face, and his once strong body carried weariness. He rarely left home, passing most business duties to others. He believed Sophia needed him more than the outside world did. The mansion staff respected his privacy. They were few, carefully chosen, and they worked quietly. They spoke softly among themselves about the girl who never smiled or laughed. Some said she hummed at night. Others said she always reached for the same toy before sleeping. But no one dared to get close to her. Life went on this way until a new maid came to the estate. Her name was Sarah. She was 27 years old, and her life had also been marked by loss. Just weeks earlier, she had buried her newborn baby. Doctors gave her no clear reason, only sorrow. With no family near and little money, she felt empty. One afternoon, while sitting in a clinic waiting room, she noticed a newspaper ad. Housekeeper needed at Hamilton Estate. Must be discreet. Without thinking much, she applied. Maybe working in a new place would help her escape the pain that filled her small apartment. When she arrived at the mansion, she expected to meet a manager. Instead, David Hamilton opened the door himself. He looked tired but steady, a man who carried sadness more than pride. He studied her closely during the interview. Sarah answered his questions simply. She didn't try to impress him. At one point, she admitted softly that she had lost a child. She didn't explain further, but that single sentence told David everything. He saw her pain, and in her calm eyes, he saw honesty. He decided to hire her. Sarah's first day at the estate was quiet. One of the older staff showed her the rooms and explained the cleaning routine. The mansion was large, but many rooms were unused, covered in silence. Sarah moved carefully, never rushing, never speaking more than necessary. Around midday, during her break in the kitchen, she saw Sophia for the first time. The little girl sat near the window, her teddy bear tight in her hands, her face blank and distant. Sarah froze for a moment, not out of fear, but out of sorrow. She had never seen a child so still. She didn't speak to her. She didn't ask questions. She just sat quietly on the other side of the room, eating her meal in silence. In her heart, she felt something deeper than pity. This child was lonely, not just blind. In the days that followed, Sarah continued her duties. She cleaned the halls, arranged books, and dusted furniture. But she began to notice small details about Sophia that others seemed to overlook. One afternoon, while dusting shelves, Sarah dropped a cloth. The sound made Sophia flinch slightly. Another day, as Sarah walked into the room, Sophia tilted her head as though she sensed her presence. These reactions made Sarah curious. She didn't rush. She didn't push. She simply stayed near, working quietly and allowing Sophia to feel her presence. Over time, Sophia began to sit in places where she could sense Sarah nearby. One afternoon, Sarah was folding linens in the hallway when she heard something faint. It was a soft hum, almost like a tune. She stopped and listened carefully. It was Sophia. The girl was whispering to herself, rocking gently as she held her teddy bear. Sarah didn't interrupt. She didn't even move closer. She just sat on the floor, folding quietly, letting the sound fill the silence of the hall. After a few minutes, Sophia crawled slowly toward the hallway wall. Her small hands brushed along the surface, searching. Sarah extended her hand gently, without a word. Sophia's tiny fingers hesitated in the air, then touched her hand. It lasted only a moment, but for Sarah, it was powerful. The child had reached out to her. From that day, Sarah made sure to pass by Sophia often. She didn't speak too much. She didn't force her. She simply stayed close. And slowly, Sophia began to shift. David noticed. One evening, he asked Sarah how things were going. She answered quietly, "She reminds me of someone I lost. I don't want to replace anyone. I just want to help her." David stayed silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. Something inside him softened. For the first time in years, he felt there was a change in the air. That night, he stood by his daughter's door and watched her sleep. Her breathing was calmer than usual. Her face looked more peaceful. For the first time, he felt that something was beginning to change. Sarah's arrival had not solved everything, but it had started something new. Days turned into weeks at the Hamilton estate. Sarah worked quietly, moving from room to room, but her attention always returned to Sophia. She was not a doctor, not a therapist, yet she noticed things others had missed for years. Sophia reacted to sounds more than people thought. When the floor creaked, she turned her head. When curtains shifted in the breeze, her eyes moved slightly. Sarah kept observing without saying anything. One afternoon, while cleaning Sophia's room, Sarah dropped a small toy on the floor. The sound was soft, but Sophia's chin tilted toward it. Sarah froze. That was not the reaction of a child fully lost in darkness. Something inside her whispered that there was more to Sophia's condition than what everyone believed. Sarah decided to test carefully. She picked up another toy, one with flashing lights, and placed it near Sophia. The girl did not react. Sarah thought maybe she was wrong. But then, as Sarah checked her phone, she accidentally turned on the flashlight. A beam of light passed across Sophia's face. In that brief second, Sarah saw it. Sophia's eyelids twitched. Her pupils shifted slightly. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. She turned off the light quickly, unsure if she had imagined it. Then she turned it on again and moved it slowly. This time, Sophia's eyes followed faintly, as if chasing something invisible. Sarah's hands shook. Could it be possible? Could Sophia actually see light? She didn't want to believe too quickly. She didn't want to give false hope. But she knew what she had seen. The next day, she tried again. She sat quietly near Sophia, waiting until the house was calm. She lifted her phone and shined the light gently. Sophia blinked twice, then tilted her head. It was real. Sarah felt tears in her eyes, but she swallowed them back. This was not the time to cry. She had to understand more. She had to be sure before telling David. Later that week, Sarah discovered something that left her deeply troubled. While organizing the bathroom cabinet, she found several small bottles of eye drops. The labels were old, the instructions unclear, but all of them carried the name of the same doctor, Dr. Victor Adams, the man who had treated Sophia since birth. Sarah searched the name of the medicine on her phone when no one was watching. What she found shook her. The drops were meant to reduce eye pressure, but reports showed that in some cases, long use in children could block natural vision responses. In high doses, they could even make a child appear blind. Her heart pounded. Was Sophia truly blind from birth, or had these drops been keeping her that way? Sarah placed the bottles back carefully and decided not to tell anyone yet. She needed more proof. The following days, she kept testing Sophia quietly. She opened curtains in the morning to let sunlight in. She noticed Sophia's face turn toward the window. She moved shadows across the floor, and Sophia's eyes shifted in that direction. Slowly, Sarah became convinced. Sophia was not completely blind. She could see something, even if only faint shapes and light. One evening, while sitting with Sophia, Sarah whispered, "Can you feel this light?" She raised her flashlight again. At first, Sophia stayed quiet. Then, in a trembling voice, she whispered words Sarah would never forget. "I think I saw a light, Mommy." Sarah froze. Tears filled her eyes instantly. This little girl, who rarely spoke at all, had not only reacted to the light, but had called her Mommy. For Sarah, who had buried her own baby weeks earlier, the word cut deep into her soul. She leaned closer, placed her hand on Sophia's shoulder, and whispered, "I'm here. You're safe." Sophia rested her head against Sarah's chest, holding her teddy bear tightly. For the first time, Sarah felt a bond forming, a bond no medicine or therapy had ever created. But the moment did not stay secret for long. One night, while Sarah was shining the light gently again, a voice roared from the hallway. "What are you doing?" It was David. He stormed into the room, his face red with anger. "What is that in your hand?" he demanded. Sarah tried to explain, but before she could, Sophia did something that shocked them both. She stood up, ran across the room, and clung tightly to Sarah's waist. David's eyes widened. His daughter had never run with such purpose before. He stood frozen as Sophia, her voice shaking, whispered, "I saw a light." David blinked, unable to breathe. "What did you say?" he asked. Sophia repeated softly, "I saw a light." The words hit him like a storm. For 8 years, he had believed his daughter was blind. Every doctor, every test, every medicine told him so. But here she was, speaking, reacting, reaching out to someone else. David lowered his voice. "Stop giving her those drops," he said to Sarah. His voice was heavy but certain. "At least for now." Sarah nodded, her heart pounding with relief. The following days brought quiet changes in the mansion. Without the drops, Sophia began to show more responses. She turned toward sunlight in the mornings. She followed simple shapes that Sarah held up on large cards. Once, she even pointed at a toy duck when Sarah nudged it forward. David stood at the doorway often, watching in silence, his eyes filled with disbelief. "She's choosing," he whispered one afternoon. Sarah nodded. "Yes, she's seeing." For the first time in years, the Hamilton estate no longer felt like a place of sorrow. There was still silence, but it was no longer heavy. It was filled with hope. Yet, deep inside, Sarah knew this was only the beginning. The truth behind Sophia's condition was bigger than what they had seen so far. And soon, they would discover that the real darkness had been caused not by fate, but by human hands. Life inside the Hamilton estate was no longer the same. Sophia, who once sat in silence with a blank stare, now turned her head toward sunlight and pointed at toys with tiny hands. For David Hamilton, it felt like seeing his daughter for the first time. Every morning, he stood by the window, watching as Sarah guided Sophia through small exercises. Sarah used big white cards with black shapes, circles, and squares. At first, Sophia hesitated, but slowly she started pointing to the correct one. Another day, Sarah placed 3 toys in front of her: a soft ball, a car, and a duck. Sophia reached for the duck after Sarah tapped it gently. "She's choosing," David whispered, his voice trembling. "Yes," Sarah replied, "she's seeing." But behind these happy moments, Sarah carried a heavy worry. She had not forgotten the eye drops. She remembered the strange bottles with the name of Dr. Victor Adams on them. And she knew deep inside that something was very wrong. One evening, after Sophia went to bed, Sarah carefully took one of the bottles and slipped it into her purse. The next morning, she drove quietly into Maplewood City and met an old friend, a trainee doctor she trusted at Riverside Medical Center. Sarah handed her the bottle and explained everything she had seen. A few days later, her friend called with shocking news. "Sarah, these are not normal drops. They contain chemicals that can reduce light response. If used for years, they can block vision almost completely. Whoever prescribed this did it on purpose." Sarah froze, her chest tightening. "So Sophia wasn't born blind?" Her friend shook her head. "If she had some sight at birth, these drops erased it. This is not a mistake. This was done knowingly." Sarah's stomach turned. She took the report and drove back to the mansion with shaking hands. That evening, she placed it on David's desk. David read in silence. His face grew pale. His hand gripped the papers tightly as he saw the name Dr. Victor Adams. "This man has been with us since Sophia was born," David muttered. "He told me she would never see. I trusted him." His voice broke. "I gave my daughter these drops every day." Sarah placed a hand gently on his arm. "You didn't know, but now we do, and we can't ignore it." David stood by the window for a long time, silent. Then he spoke firmly. "We will find him. We will know why he did this." The days that followed were filled with research and phone calls. David used his resources to dig into the past of Dr. Victor Adams. What they discovered was disturbing. Adams had been accused in other states of malpractice. Some families had filed complaints, saying their children lost vision under his care, but the cases never made headlines. He had paid settlements quietly and disappeared. Now it was clear Sophia was not his only victim. David's anger grew, but so did his guilt. For years, he had accepted Adams's words without question. He had lived in silence with his daughter, while the truth was hidden in plain sight. But while the fight for justice was beginning, something even more powerful was happening inside the mansion. Sophia was changing. She began asking questions. She asked about colors. She asked about shapes. She pointed at blankets and said, "What color is this?" When Sarah told her it was yellow, she smiled and said, "Yellow makes me happy." David, who once only watched from a distance, now sat beside her every evening. He showed her photo albums, gently asking if she could notice anything. One evening, Sophia squinted at a picture of her mother and whispered, "Who is that lady in the red dress?" Tears filled David's eyes. His daughter, once trapped in silence, had recognized her mother's image. The mansion was no longer quiet with sorrow. It was filled with laughter, questions, and the sound of crayons scratching paper as Sophia drew her first pictures. Sarah pinned them proudly to the kitchen wall. But outside the estate, trouble was rising. One morning, false news articles appeared online. They accused David of ignoring medical advice for years. They painted him as a careless father. Another article suggested that Sarah was lying, that she had invented Sophia's progress for attention. David slammed the papers on the desk. "They're trying to silence us," he growled. Sarah nodded. "It means we're getting close to the truth." Soon after, she received strange text messages from an unknown number. "Stay out of this. Stop asking questions, or you will regret it." Her hands shook, but she refused to back down. "Sophia deserves the truth," she whispered to herself. David gathered his legal team. Together, they collected the medical reports, the toxicology results, and testimonies from other families. Slowly, the truth began to spread. Local reporters picked up the story. Then national outlets followed. Soon, more families came forward, sharing how their children had been hurt by Dr. Adams. The pressure grew until authorities finally opened a formal investigation. The trial that followed was long and difficult. David sat in court, his face hard, while Sarah testified calmly. She explained how she noticed Sophia's reactions, how she discovered the bottles, how she sought answers. Her voice was steady, filled with truth. David also testified. He admitted his blind trust in the doctor and his failure to question him. His honesty touched the court. Finally, the evidence was clear. Dr. Victor Adams had been running secret experiments with unapproved medicines, using children as test subjects. He was found guilty and sentenced to prison. The companies involved were fined heavily and banned from such practices. When the verdict was read, David closed his eyes and held Sarah's hand tightly. Justice had finally been served. Back at the Hamilton estate, life slowly returned to peace. Sophia kept improving. She learned to draw better, to read with large letters, and to recognize faces. David turned one room into her art studio, filling it with crayons, paints, and paper. Months later, Sophia held her first small art show at Brighton Academy, her new school. Parents and teachers stood in awe as the girl once thought blind showed colorful drawings of flowers, skies, and smiling faces. At the end of the event, Sophia stood before the crowd and spoke softly but clearly. "People ask me when I first saw light, but the truth is, the first light I ever saw didn't come from my eyes. It came from her heart." She pointed at Sarah. The room went silent, then filled with applause. Sarah covered her face in tears while David placed an arm around her shoulders. In that moment, the Hamilton estate was no longer a house of shadows. It was a home of love, truth, and second chances.